Vernon Caldwell doesn't exist. The station master's words hit Lillian Parker like a slap across the face. She stood frozen on the platform, clutching the letter she'd carried across 3 states, the letter promising marriage and a new life in Colorado Springs. Her fingers trembled as she read Vernon's signature one more time, trying to make sense of what she'd just heard. The man she'd traveled 2,000 miles to marry, the man who'd written such beautiful words about their future together, wasn't real. And now she was stranded in a dusty Arizona town with 17 cents in her pocket and nowhere to go. Please subscribe to our channel and follow this story to the end. Comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far this story has traveled. Lillian stared at the station master, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might crack through her ribs. What do you mean he doesn't exist? The old man scratched his weathered neck, looking uncomfortable. Miss, I've been working this station for 23 years. Never heard of no Vernon Caldwell in Colorado Springs. And I know every rancher, every businessman, every soul worth knowing between here and Denver. But he wrote me letters, dozens of them. Lillian's voice cracked. She pulled the stack of envelopes from her carpet bag, her hands shaking so badly the paper rustled like dry leaves. He told me about his ranch, his life, I'm sure he did, miss. The station master's eyes softened with something that looked like pity, and that pity felt worse than any harsh word could have. But that don't make it true. We see women come through here every few months, all carrying letters just like yours, all looking for men who don't exist. The world tilted sideways. Lillian grabbed the edge of the ticket counter to steady herself. Every few months, 3 just this year, one woman came from Philadelphia, another from Charleston. They all had the same story, beautiful letters, promises of marriage, a better life out west. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Miss, whoever wrote you those letters, he ain't the man you think he is. Lillian felt something inside her chest collapse like a building falling in on itself. She'd sold everything she owned in Boston. Her mother's sewing machine, the pearl earrings her grandmother left her, even the good winter coat she'd planned to wear at her wedding. All of it gone, converted into train fare, and the belief that Vernon Caldwell was waiting for her. The next train to Colorado Springs leaves tomorrow morning. The station master continued, his voice gentle. But miss, if I were you, I'd think real hard about whether that's where you want to go. I don't have money for tomorrow's train. The words came out flat, hollow. I spent everything I had just getting here. The station master winced. There's a boarding house 2 streets over. Mrs. Crowley runs it. She might. I don't have money for that either. Lillian cut him off, the reality of her situation finally breaking through the shock. She had 17 cents. Not enough for a room, not enough for food, not enough for anything except maybe a cup of coffee, and complete despair. She turned away from the counter before the old man could see her cry. Her eyes burned, but she refused to let the tears fall. She'd come too far, sacrificed too much, believed too deeply to fall apart now on a train platform in front of strangers. The afternoon sun beat down on Quartz Hill's main street like a physical weight. Lillian walked without direction, her carpet bag dragging in the dust. Vernon's letters still clutched in her other hand. Every building looked the same, weathered wood, faded paint windows that reflected nothing but her own foolish face staring back. How could she have been so stupid? Her sister Catherine had warned her. You don't know this man, Lillian. You've never even met him. But Lillian had been so sure, so certain that Vernon's words meant something real. His letters had painted such vivid pictures, the ranch with the creek running through it, the garden he'd plant for her, the life they'd build together. She'd memorized every detail, every promise, every dream he'd written. All lies, every single word. She stumbled on a loose board in the walkway, catching herself against a post just before she fell. Her carpet bag hit the ground, spilling its contents across the dusty street. 2 dresses, a hairbrush, her sewing kit, and those damned letters scattered like broken promises in the dirt. Easy there. A man's voice came from behind her. You all right? Lillian spun around, immediately defensive. She'd trusted a man's voice once before, trusted his written words, and look where that had gotten her. "I'm fine." But she wasn't fine, and they both knew it. The man crouched down, gathering her scattered belongings with careful hands. He was young, maybe 30, with sun-darkened skin and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. He wore work clothes, a dusty shirt, worn pants, boots that had seen plenty of hard use. A cowboy, clearly though, his eyes held something different from the rough men she'd seen loitering around the saloons she'd passed. "These letters must be important," he said, picking up Vernon's envelopes with surprising gentleness. "They're the only things not covered in dust." "They're worthless." Lillian snatched them from his hand more roughly than she intended. "Less than worthless." The cowboy stood studying her, with an expression she couldn't quite read. "You just get off the train." What gave it away? The lost expression, or the desperate circumstances? The bitterness in her voice surprised even herself. "The carpet bag." He gestured to her belongings now back in the bag he'd set carefully on the walkway. "And the fact that you're standing in the middle of town looking like the world just ended." Maybe it did. Lillian met his eyes, too tired to pretend anymore. "I came here to meet someone who doesn't exist. I have 17 cents and nowhere to go. So yes, the world ended about 20 minutes ago." The cowboy's expression shifted, not to pity, thank God, but to something else. Understanding, maybe. "Vernon Caldwell." Lillian's blood went cold. "How did you—" "Because you're the third woman this year to show up looking for him." The cowboy's jaw tightened. "And I'm getting real tired of watching women's hearts break on this street corner." "You knew he wasn't real." Anger flared hot and sudden in Lillian's chest. "You knew women were coming here and you didn't—" "We didn't know until the second woman showed up 3 months ago. That's when folks started putting the pieces together." He held up his hands, defensive. "Sheriff tried tracking down whoever's writing these letters, but they're coming from all over. Different post offices, different return addresses, all fake." Lillian wanted to scream. She wanted to throw Vernon's letters in the street and watch them burn. She wanted to go back in time and slap herself for being naive enough to believe a stranger's promises. But mostly, she just wanted to disappear. "My name's Cole Mercer," the cowboy said, and something in his straightforward tone made her look up. "I work at Red Crest Ranch about 5 miles north of town, and I might know someone who can help you." "Unless you know someone giving away train tickets and new lives, I doubt it." "Mrs. Crowley runs the boarding house." Cole spoke carefully, like he was approaching a spooked horse. "She's been looking for someone who can do mending and sewing. Her arthritis has been getting worse, and she's got more work than she can handle." "I don't have money to pay for a room while I work." "She might trade, room and board, for your skills." Cole shifted his weight, looking uncomfortable. "It's not much, but it's something. Better than sleeping under the stars or taking the next train back east with nothing." Lillian studied him, trying to find the angle, the catch that would reveal itself too late. "Why are you helping me?" "Because someone should have helped the other women before you." Cole's voice went hard. "And because standing by while people suffer ain't something I'm good at." There was something in his eyes, a kind of steady honesty, that reminded Lillian of her father, who'd died when she was 15. Her father had been a carpenter, a man who believed in straight lines and solid foundations. This cowboy had that same quality, like he'd been built from the same reliable timber. "All right," she said finally, because what choice did she have? "Show me this boarding house." Mrs. Crowley turned out to be a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s, with iron-gray hair and hands twisted by arthritis into shapes that looked painful just to witness. She looked Lillian up and down with the assessing gaze of someone who'd learned to measure people quickly and accurately. "You any good with a needle?" Mrs. Crowley asked bluntly. "I was a seamstress in Boston for 6 years," Lillian answered. "I can do everything from basic mending to wedding dresses." "Show me your hands." Lillian held out her hands, palms up. They were marked with the tiny scars and calluses of someone who'd spent years pushing needles through fabric, working in poor light, creating beauty from raw cloth. Mrs. Crowley nodded, satisfied. I've got 7 rooms upstairs, all with curtains that need hemming or replacing. I've got a pile of torn sheets that need mending. I've got 3 dresses waiting for alterations, and a tablecloth that needs lace added for a wedding next month. She paused. You do all that, plus handle any sewing work that comes in from town, and I'll give you the small room at the end of the hall plus 3 meals a day. For how long? Long as you keep working, long as you don't cause trouble. Mrs. Crowley's eyes narrowed. Cole says you came here for Vernon Caldwell. Lillian's face burned. I was foolish. You were hopeful. Different thing. Mrs. Crowley's voice softened slightly. But hope don't pay the rent, and neither does standing around feeling sorry for yourself. You want the room or not? I want it. Lillian said it quickly, before the pride she barely had left could talk her out of accepting charity. Then get your bag, and I'll show you where you'll sleep. Mrs. Crowley turned toward the stairs, then paused. One more thing. I don't tolerate lying, stealing, or drama. You bring any of that into my house, you're out. Understood? Understood. Cole had waited by the door during the entire exchange. Now he caught Lillian's eye, giving her a small nod that felt like approval. I'll be by tomorrow to check on you, he said. Make sure you're settling in all right. You don't have to do that. I know I don't. Cole settled his hat on his head. But I'm going to anyway. After he left, Mrs. Crowley led Lillian up a narrow staircase to a small room at the end of the hall. It held a single bed, a washstand, a chair, and a window that looked out over the back alley. Nothing fancy. Nothing like the life Vernon had promised. But it was real. It was solid. It was hers, at least for now. Lillian set her carpet bag on the chair and sat on the bed, feeling the exhaustion of the past 2 days finally catch up to her. She pulled out Vernon's letters one more time, reading the top one with fresh eyes. My dearest Lillian, I cannot wait for the day when you'll arrive in Colorado Springs and we'll begin our life together. The ranch is more beautiful than I can describe in words. You'll have to see it to believe it. She'd believed every word. She'd built an entire future on these lies. Lillian stood up, walked to the window and tore the letter in half, then in half again, and again, until Vernon Caldwell's beautiful words were nothing but confetti in her hands. She let the pieces fall into the alley below, watching them scatter in the evening breeze. Tomorrow, she'd start sewing. Tomorrow, she'd figure out what came next. But tonight, she'd mourn the future she'd lost, and the woman she'd been foolish enough to be. The next morning came too early. Lillian woke to the sound of voices in the street below and the smell of coffee drifting up from the kitchen. Her body ached from the journey, from sleeping in an unfamiliar bed, from the weight of disappointment she'd carried into her dreams. Mrs. Crowley had already laid out the work when Lillian came downstairs. 7 sets of curtains, the pile of torn sheets, the dresses waiting for alterations. Enough work to keep her busy for weeks, maybe months. Start with the curtains, Mrs. Crowley instructed, pouring Lillian a cup of coffee that was strong enough to strip paint. The rooms need them by the weekend. We've got new boarders coming in. Lillian set up her workspace at the kitchen table, threading her needle with practiced efficiency. The familiar rhythm of sewing calmed something inside her needle. Through fabric, pull the thread, repeat. It was honest work. She knew how to do work that didn't require trust or belief or hope. She was halfway through the first curtain when Cole appeared at the back door, hat in hand. Told you I'd check on you, he said to Lillian, though his eyes went to Mrs. Crowley first, asking silent permission. She's working, Mrs. Crowley said gruffly, not accepting visitors. I'm not visiting, I'm delivering information. Cole stepped inside, and Lillian noticed he'd cleaned up since yesterday. Fresh shirt, clean-shaven hair combed back. There's another woman at the train station, just arrived on the morning train from Kansas City. She's asking for Vernon Caldwell. Lillian's needle stopped mid-stitch. Another one. Sheriff Harding's with her now, explaining the situation. Cole's expression went dark. But I thought you might want to know. Thought maybe you could talk to her woman to woman. Might help her understand she's not alone in this. I don't want to talk about Vernon Caldwell. Lillian's voice came out sharper than she intended. I don't want to think about him, hear his name, or remember that I was stupid enough to believe his lies. She's 20 years old, Cole said quietly. Younger than you. She sold her mother's wedding ring to buy her train ticket. She's standing on that platform right now, crying so hard she can't breathe, and she thinks she's the only woman in the world who's ever been this foolish. The words hit Lillian like a punch to the chest. 20 years old. God, at 20, Lillian had still believed the world was fundamentally good, that people meant what they said. That hope was enough to build a life on. What's her name? Lillian heard herself ask. Emma Patterson. From Topeka. Lillian set down her sewing and stood up. Where is she? The girl at the train station looked even younger than 20. She sat on a bench with her face in her hands, shoulders shaking with sobs that came from somewhere deep and broken inside her. Sheriff Harding stood nearby, looking helpless, the way men always looked when faced with a woman's tears. Lillian sat down beside Emma without saying a word. She didn't offer comfort or advice or false promises. She just sat there, a solid presence, until Emma finally looked up. You're one of them, aren't you? Emma's voice was raw. One of the other women. I got here yesterday. Lillian met Emma's red-rimmed eyes. Sold everything I owned in Boston to come here. I've been sewing since dawn to earn room and board because I don't have enough money to leave. What are we going to do? We're going to survive, Lillian said, surprised by the steel in her own voice. We're going to stop crying over a man who doesn't exist. We're going to figure out what comes next. And we're going to make damn sure no other woman falls for these lies. Emma wiped her face with the back of her hand. How? I don't know yet. Lillian looked at Sheriff Harding, who'd been listening to every word. But we're going to find out who's writing these letters, and we're going to stop him. Sheriff Harding shifted his weight, looking uncomfortable with Lillian's declaration. Miss Parker, hunting down mail fraud ain't something civilians should be. Then what should we be doing? Lillian stood up, feeling anger replace the shame she'd been carrying since yesterday. Sitting quietly while more women get their hearts broken and their savings stolen. Going home with our tails between our legs while this man keeps destroying lives. She's right. Emma wiped her eyes, her voice steadier now. Someone has to do something. The sheriff sighed, the sound of a man who'd fought this battle before and lost. I've already contacted postal inspectors. They're investigating, but these operations move around. Different towns, different post offices, different names. By the time we track down one location, they've already moved to the next. So we're supposed to just accept it. Lillian felt her hands curl into fists. Accept that we were foolish enough to fall for lies and move on. I'm saying it's more complicated than you think. Sheriff Harding's voice softened. I've got 3 other cases just like yours on my desk right now. Land fraud, investment schemes, cattle deals that don't exist. Every one of them involves people who got taken advantage of by someone smarter and more ruthless than they expected. Cole, who'd been standing quietly near the platform, finally spoke up. What about the letters themselves? Can't you trace them somehow? Different postmarks every time. Kansas City, St. Louis, Denver, even one from San Francisco. The sheriff shook his head. Whoever's running this knows how to cover their tracks. Let me see one of the letters, Emma said suddenly, turning to Lillian. The ones he sent you, please. Lillian hesitated. I destroyed most of them last night. But not all of them. Emma's eyes were intense focused. You kept some, didn't you? We all keep some. Lillian felt her face grow hot because Emma was right. Despite everything, despite knowing Vernon Caldwell was a lie, she'd kept 3 letters tucked in the bottom of her carpet bag. The ones that had seemed most beautiful, most real, most promising. I have a few back at the boarding house. Then let's go look at them. Emma stood up, her tears dried, replaced by something harder. Together. Maybe we'll see something the sheriff missed. They walked back to Mrs. Crowley's boarding house in silence. Emma clutching her small suitcase like it might disappear if she let go. Cole followed at a respectful distance, his presence solid and reassuring in a way that made Lillian both grateful and uncomfortable. She didn't want to need anyone's protection, didn't want to feel like she required saving. But she also couldn't deny that having him there made the world feel slightly less dangerous. Inside the boarding house, Mrs. Crowley took one look at Emma's tear-stained face and poured her a cup of coffee without asking questions. "You'll be needing a room too, I suppose." "I don't have money for—" "Can you cook?" Mrs. Crowley interrupted. Emma blinked. "Yes, ma'am. I worked in my mother's restaurant for 5 years." "Then you can earn your keep in the kitchen. I'm getting too old to do all the cooking myself." Mrs. Crowley's tone was brisk businesslike, but Lillian caught the flicker of kindness underneath. "Room's next to Miss Parker's upstairs. Same rules apply, no lying, no stealing, no drama." "Thank you." Emma's voice cracked. "Thank you so much." Upstairs, Lillian retrieved the 3 letters from her carpet bag and spread them on the bed. Emma pulled out her own collection, 7 letters, each one carefully preserved despite the journey. Cole stood in the doorway, giving them space but staying close enough to listen. "Read this one," Emma said, pointing to her first letter. "The one where he describes the ranch." Lillian read aloud. "My dearest Emma, the ranch sits in a valley where the creek runs clear and cold, fed by mountain springs that never run dry. The house has a wide porch where we'll sit in the evenings watching the sun set over the peaks. There's a garden plot waiting for your touch, and a barn that needs a woman's eye to make it truly a home." "Now read yours," Emma said quietly. Lillian picked up one of her letters. "My dearest Lillian, the ranch sits in a valley where the creek runs clear and cold, fed by mountain springs that never run dry. The house has a—" She stopped, her blood running cold. "It's the same, word for word." "Not just the same." Emma's voice shook. "Exactly the same. He didn't even bother changing the description." Cole moved into the room, picking up another letter. "May I—" Emma nodded. He read silently for a moment, then looked up. "This one talks about his childhood. Says he grew up in Kentucky, learned ranching from his father before moving west. Mine says he grew up in Tennessee." Lillian said, her stomach twisting. "But the rest of the story is identical, learning ranching from his father, moving west to find his fortune. Mine says Virginia." Emma's hands trembled as she sorted through her letters. Everything else matches. The sick mother he had to care for, the sister who died of fever. The reason he's looking for a wife through letters instead of courting local women. "Because he's shy," Lillian whispered. "Because the women in his town don't understand him," Emma added. "Because he's been too busy building his ranch to have time for socializing." Cole's voice was hard, angry in a way Lillian hadn't heard before. "He told you all the same story, just changed enough details to make each woman feel special." The realization hit Lillian like a physical blow. She'd thought Vernon's letters were written specifically for her, that his words were meant for her alone. But they weren't. They were a template, a script, lines he'd used on dozens, maybe hundreds of women. She wasn't special. She was just another mark in a long con. "There's something else," Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Look at the handwriting." Lillian looked. The letters were written in elegant script, the kind that suggested education and refinement. But now that Emma mentioned it, she could see the variations, slight differences in the slant, the pressure, the way certain letters were formed. "Different people wrote these," Cole said, reaching the same conclusion. "This isn't one man working alone. It's multiple people, all copying the same letters. An operation." Sheriff Harding's voice came from the doorway. He must have followed them from the station. "Not just a single con artist, but an organized group. That's why we can't track them down. They're spread out across multiple cities, recruiting local people to do the writing and mailing." "Then how do we stop them?" Lillian demanded. "You don't." The sheriff's tone was firm. "You leave it to the law. What you do is try to rebuild your lives and move on." "Move on?" Emma's voice rose. "How are we supposed to move on when they're still out there, still doing this to other women?" by being smarter than you were before. The sheriff's words were harsh, but not unkind. By learning from your mistakes and making better choices next time. We didn't make mistakes, Lillian said, surprised by the strength in her own voice. We trusted, we hoped, we believed that someone could love us enough to promise us a future. That's not a mistake, that's being human. Then be human somewhere safer. The sheriff tipped his hat. I'll keep investigating, but you need to let this go, both of you. After he left, the room fell silent. Lillian stared at the letters spread across her bed, feeling something shift inside her. She'd spent the past day feeling foolish and ashamed, blaming herself for being naive enough to believe Vernon's lies. But now, looking at the calculated precision of the con, the way they'd targeted women's hopes and dreams with such methodical cruelty, she felt something else entirely. Rage. We're not letting this go, she said quietly. Emma looked up, hope flickering in her eyes. What do you mean? I mean, we're going to figure out who's behind this. We're going to find out how they operate, where they recruit their writers, how they choose their victims. Lillian met Emma's gaze. And then we're going to make sure every woman between here and the Atlantic knows to watch out for their lies. That's a dangerous game, Cole said from the doorway. More dangerous than being stranded in a strange town with no money and no future? Lillian challenged. More dangerous than letting these people keep destroying lives. Cole studied her for a long moment, and Lillian couldn't quite read the expression on his face. All right, he said finally. If you're going to do this, you're going to need help, and information, and probably more than a little luck. Are you offering all three? I'm offering to ask around, see if anyone knows anything about these mail-order marriage schemes. Cole shifted his weight. My boss at Redcrest Ranch, Mr. Buchanan, he's well connected. Knows people all over the territory. If there's information to be found, he might know where to look. Why would you do that? Emma asked. You don't even know us. Because I've got 3 sisters back in Texas, Cole said simply. And if someone did this to them, I'd want someone to help them fight back. Over the next week, a pattern emerged. Lillian sewed during the day, her needle flying through fabric, as her mind worked through the puzzle of Vernon Caldwell. Emma cooked 3 meals a day for Mrs. Crowley's boarders, learning the rhythms of the boarding house, while quietly asking questions of everyone who passed through. And Cole stopped by every evening after work, sharing what he'd learned. The information came in pieces, fragments that slowly formed a larger picture. A ranch hand at Red Crest knew a woman in Tucson who'd been caught writing fake love letters for $20 a month. A shopkeeper mentioned hearing about a postal inspector in Denver investigating similar schemes. A traveling salesman told Cole about a woman in Kansas City who'd started a registry warning other women about fraudulent marriage proposals. Her name's Margaret Chen, Cole said one evening sitting at Mrs. Crowley's kitchen table while Lillian hemmed a dress. She's been collecting names of known con artists and publishing them in newspapers across the West. If we could get our information to her, then other women might be warned before they make the same mistake we did. Lillian set down her sewing, excited. How do we contact her? Write her a letter. Cole pulled a piece of paper from his pocket. I got her address from the salesman. You tell her everything, the letters, the identical stories, the multiple handwriting styles. Give her all the details you can remember. What if she doesn't believe us? Emma asked from her place by the stove. Then we find someone else who will. Lillian's jaw set with determination. And we keep trying until someone listens. That night, Lillian and Emma sat up late writing out everything they could remember. The dates Vernon's letters had arrived, the postmarks, the specific promises he'd made. They described the elegant handwriting, the way certain phrases were repeated word for word, the careful manipulation of their hopes and fears. He knew exactly what to say. Emma said as she wrote, He told me I was brave for considering moving west. He said my mother would be proud of me for seeking a better life. He told me I was wasting my talents in Boston, Lillian added, that a woman with my skills deserved more than a cramped apartment and a job that barely paid rent. Because he knew what we wanted to hear. Emma's hand shook slightly. He knew we were looking for someone to tell us we mattered. And he used that against us. They finished the letter just after midnight. Lillian read it through one final time, making sure they hadn't forgotten any crucial details. Then she sealed it carefully, addressed it to Margaret Chen in Kansas City, and set it aside to mail in the morning. "What if nothing comes of this?" Emma asked quietly. "Then at least we tried." Lillian looked at her new friend, this girl, who'd become an unexpected ally in the span of a week. "And at least we'll know we didn't just accept what happened to us. We fought back." The next morning, Cole appeared at the boarding house earlier than usual, his expression tight with something Lillian couldn't quite identify. "There's another woman," he said without preamble. "Just arrived on the dawn train, asking for Vernon Caldwell." Lillian and Emma exchanged glances. "That's 3 in 8 days," Emma said. "How many women is he writing to?" "More than we thought." Cole's voice was grim. "This one's from Mississippi. She's got a baby with her." The words hit Lillian like a punch. A baby. About 6 months old. She sold her house to buy train tickets for both of them. Cole looked sick. She thought she was bringing her daughter to meet her new father. Lillian was moving before she consciously decided to grabbing her shawl and heading for the door. Emma followed, and Cole fell into step behind them. They reached the train station to find a young woman sitting on the same bench where Emma had cried just days before, a baby sleeping against her shoulder. "My name's Lillian Parker," Lillian said, gently sitting down beside her. "And I came here 8 days ago to meet the same man you're looking for." The woman's name was Sarah Mitchell, and her story was heartbreakingly similar to their own. Letters, promises, dreams built on lies. But Sarah's situation was worse. She'd left behind everything, burned every bridge, because she thought she was giving her daughter a better life. "What am I going to do?" Sarah's voice was hollow. "I can't go back. My husband's family said if I left, I could never return. They said I was abandoning his memory by looking for another man so soon after his death." "How long has he been gone?" Emma asked quietly. 11 months. He died in a factory accident." Sarah pressed her face against her baby's head. "Everyone said I should be grateful his family was willing to take us in, that I should spend the rest of my life mourning him properly. But I couldn't do it. I couldn't spend decades living in his mother's house being reminded every day that I was a burden they were bearing out of obligation." "So you answered Vernon's advertisement," Lillian said. "I thought I was giving Clara a real home. A father who would choose to love her, not just tolerate her out of duty." Sarah's tears fell silently. "Instead, I've made us both homeless." "No." Lillian spoke with sudden certainty. "You've brought her to a place where people will help you, where you can build something real instead of living in someone else's shadow." "I don't understand." "Mrs. Crowley's boarding house needs help. Emma's cooking, I'm sewing, but we could use someone to help with cleaning and laundry." Lillian looked at Sarah's exhausted face, her sleeping baby, her obvious desperation. "You help with that, and you'll have a room and meals for both of you." "I can't accept charity." "It's not charity, it's work." Emma's voice was firm. "And it's a chance to figure out your next step without panicking." Sarah looked between them, tears streaming down her face. "Why are you helping me?" "Because someone helped us," Lillian said simply. "And because no woman should face this alone." Mrs. Crowley took Sarah and Clara in without hesitation, though her gruff exterior cracked slightly when she saw the baby. "Put them in the room across from Miss Parker's," she instructed, "and someone find a cradle. Can't have a baby sleeping in a drawer." Cole disappeared and returned an hour later with a beautiful hand-carved cradle. "Mr. Buchanan's wife sent it," he explained. "She said they don't need it anymore, and it should go to someone who does." "Thank your boss for me," Sarah said, settling Clara into the cradle with trembling hands. "Tell him I'll pay him back somehow." "He doesn't expect payment." Cole's voice was gentle. "He just wants to help." That evening, the 4 of them sat in the boarding house kitchen, Lillian, Emma, Sarah, and Cole. Mrs. Crowley listened from her seat by the stove, pretending to focus on her knitting, but clearly absorbing every word. 3 women in 8 days, Emma said quietly. How many more are coming? We need to warn them somehow, Sarah said. We need to let women know that Vernon Caldwell doesn't exist before they make the same mistakes we did. I already wrote to Margaret Chen in Kansas City, Lillian said. She publishes warnings about fraudulent marriage proposals. If she prints our story, it might reach other women. But what about the women who don't read those newspapers? Emma pressed. What about the ones in small towns who only see the local paper, or women who can't read at all? Cole had been quiet thinking. Now he spoke up. What if you wrote your own warning? Posted it at train stations, sent copies to newspapers across the West, made sure every woman traveling alone knew to be careful. Who'd listen to us? Sarah asked. We're just 3 women who fell for a con. Why would anyone take our words seriously? Because you're not just 3 women anymore. Mrs. Crowley set down her knitting, her voice sharp and clear. You're 3 women who survived, 3 women who are fighting back. That carries weight. Lillian felt something settle in her chest, a sense of purpose she hadn't felt since before Vernon's letters had arrived. Then we write a warning. We tell our stories. And we make sure every woman between here and Boston knows that if something seems too good to be true, it probably is. We'll need help, Emma said. We'll need people to distribute the warnings, newspapers willing to print them, station masters willing to post them. I can help with that, Cole offered. Mr. Buchanan knows editors across the territory, and the ranch hands travel all over. They could carry copies to different towns. Why? Lillian asked the question she'd been holding back, finally breaking free. Why are you doing all this for us? You don't owe us anything. Cole met her eyes, and for the first time, Lillian saw past the steady cowboy exterior to something deeper underneath. Because what happened to you 3 wasn't just wrong, it was cruel. And I don't stand by when I see cruelty being done, especially not to people who were just looking for a better life. There's more to it than that, Lillian said, reading something in his expression. Cole was quiet for a moment. My youngest sister, Mary, she's 17. Last year she met a man at a church social who said all the right things, promised to marry her, take her to California, give her a life better than the one she had in Texas. He paused, his jaw tight. He took her savings and disappeared, left her heartbroken and ashamed, feeling like she'd been too stupid to see through his lies. I'm sorry, Emma said softly. She's all right now, stronger even, but it took months for her to stop blaming herself. Cole's eyes were hard. So when I see women going through the same thing, I think about Mary. And I help because I couldn't help her until it was too late. The kitchen fell silent. Outside Quartz Hill settled into evening, the sounds of closing shops and evening meals drifting through the windows. Inside, 4 people sat around a table bound together by shared hurt and shared determination. Then we do this together, Lillian said finally. We write the warnings, we spread the word, and we make sure Vernon Caldwell and people like him can't keep destroying lives. Together, Emma agreed. Together. Sarah echoed her hand, resting protectively on her sleeping daughter's cradle. Cole nodded, and Lillian saw respect in his eyes. I'll talk to Mr. Buchanan tomorrow. Get the ball rolling on distribution and newspaper contacts. After Cole left, Lillian sat at the kitchen table, a blank piece of paper in front of her. She picked up her pen, then set it down again. How did you warn someone about hope? How did you tell women to be careful with their hearts without making them afraid to trust anyone? Start with the truth, Mrs. Crowley said from her chair. Tell them what happened, plain and simple. No embellishment, no drama. Just the facts. Lillian picked up her pen again and began to write. To all women considering correspondence with unknown men regarding marriage proposals. The words came slowly at first, then faster as she found her voice. She wrote about Vernon Caldwell, about the beautiful letters and false promises. She wrote about the 3 women in Quartz Hill who'd lost everything chasing a lie. And she wrote about the importance of verification, of caution, of protecting yourself, even while hoping for something better. Emma read over her shoulder, offering suggestions. Sarah added details from her own experience. And slowly, painfully, they crafted a warning that felt both honest and hopeful, a message that said, "Be careful," without saying, "Give up." When they finally finished well past midnight, Lillian felt exhausted, but also strangely energized. They'd done something. Maybe it wouldn't be enough. Maybe it wouldn't reach everyone who needed to see it. But it was a start. "Tomorrow we make copies," Emma said, yawning. "And then we send them everywhere we can think of. Tomorrow we change things." Sarah added, her voice quiet but determined. Lillian looked at her 2 new friends, these women who'd become allies through shared pain, and felt something unexpected gratitude. Yes, Vernon Caldwell had broken her heart and stolen her savings, but he'd also led her here to this moment, to these people. And maybe, just maybe, that would turn out to matter more than the hurt. The next morning brought news that shattered their tentative hope. Cole arrived before sunrise, his face grim, holding a telegram that trembled slightly in his hand. "There's been another woman," he said without preamble. "But this one didn't make it to Quartz Hill." Lillian's blood went cold. "What do you mean?" "Sheriff in Flagstaff found her 3 days ago. Young woman from Ohio traveling alone to meet Vernon Caldwell. She got off the train, realized she'd been conned, and—" Cole's voice broke. "She walked into the desert and didn't come back." Emma's hand flew to her mouth. Sarah pulled Clara closer, as if the baby could protect her from the horror of what Cole was saying. Lillian felt her legs go weak, had to grip the back of a chair to stay standing. "They found her yesterday," Cole continued, his voice rough. "Sheriff's trying to contact her family back in Ohio, but there's no one listed in her belongings. No return address, no family names. Just letters from Vernon Caldwell and a train ticket purchased one way." "Oh God!" Lillian's whisper was barely audible. She was alone. Completely alone. Her name was Catherine Reeves. She was 19 years old. Cole set the telegram on the table like it weighed 1,000 pounds. "The sheriff wants to know if any of you recognize the name, if she might have mentioned other women she was traveling with." "I don't know her," Emma said, tears already streaming down her face. "But I could have been her. If you hadn't been there that day, Cole, if Mrs. Crowley hadn't offered me work." "Don't!" Sarah's voice was sharp, almost angry. "Don't think like that. You're alive. We're all alive. That has to mean something." But Lillian couldn't stop thinking it. She'd come within inches of the same despair that had driven Catherine Reeves into the desert. Those first hours in Quartz Hill, standing on the platform with 17 cents and nowhere to go, she'd felt the world closing in. If Cole hadn't appeared, if Mrs. Crowley hadn't needed a seamstress, would she have walked away too? Would she have given up? "We have to move faster," Lillian said, her voice steady, despite the trembling in her hands. "Our warning has to reach women before they buy those train tickets, before they sell everything they own, before they end up like Catherine." "I talked to Mr. Buchanan last night," Cole said. "He's already contacted 3 newspaper editors who've agreed to print your warning. But there's something else you need to know." The way he said it made Lillian's stomach twist. "What?" "One of the editors, man named Harrison in Tucson, he's been investigating these marriage fraud cases for months. He's got information about the operation, names, locations, how they recruit the letter writers." Cole paused. "He wants to meet with you, all 3 of you. Says your testimonies could help him build a case strong enough to shut the whole thing down." "When?" Emma asked immediately. "He's coming to Quartz Hill tomorrow. Wants to interview each of you separately, get the full story." Cole's eyes met Lillian's. "But there's a risk. If he publishes your names, your stories, the people running this con will know you're working against them." "Good," Lillian said fiercely. "Let them know. Let them understand that we're not going to disappear quietly." "Lillian, these people have already proven they're willing to destroy lives." Cole's voice was urgent. What if they come after you directly? Then we'll be ready." But even as she said it, Lillian felt fear slide cold fingers down her spine. She'd been so focused on fighting back on warning other women that she hadn't considered what the con artists might do to protect their operation. Sarah spoke up, her voice quiet but firm. "My daughter is 6 months old. I won't put her at risk, not even for justice." "You don't have to participate," Emma said quickly. "Lillian and I can meet with the editor. You stay here with Clara, keep yourself safe." "No." Sarah's jaw set with unexpected steel. "I won't hide while you two put yourselves in danger. We do this together or not at all." Mrs. Crowley, who'd been listening from her usual spot by the stove, finally spoke. "Then you make sure that editor knows what he's asking of you. Make sure he understands the cost and the risk. And make sure he's prepared to protect you if things go wrong." Harrison arrived the next afternoon, a thin man in his 40s, with ink-stained fingers and eyes that missed nothing. He set up in Mrs. Crowley's parlor, pulled out a notebook, and got straight to business. "Tell me everything," he said to Lillian. "Start from the first letter and don't leave anything out." Lillian told him. The letters, the promises, the careful manipulation of her hopes. She showed him the 3 letters she'd kept, pointed out the elegant handwriting, the identical phrases that appeared in Emma's and Sarah's correspondence. Harrison wrote quickly, his pen scratching across page after page. "And you sold everything you owned to buy the train ticket?" he asked. "Everything." Lillian felt the shame try to rise up again, but she pushed it down. She wasn't ashamed anymore. She was angry. "My mother's sewing machine, my grandmother's earrings, my winter coat. I thought I was investing in my future. Instead, I was funding a criminal enterprise." "That's exactly what it is." Harrison's voice was hard. "I've been tracking these operations for 8 months. They're more organized than you realize, multiple people working in different cities, all copying from the same script templates, all targeting women who fit a specific profile." "What profile?" Emma asked from the doorway. "Single women between 20 and 35, usually from working-class backgrounds, often with some savings, but not wealthy. Women who are literate enough to correspond, but isolated enough to be vulnerable." Harrison looked up from his notes. "Women who want a better life, but don't have many options to get it." "Women like us," Sarah said quietly. "Yes, because you're the perfect marks, desperate enough to take a chance, hopeful enough to believe the promises, and poor enough that losing everything won't make headlines." Harrison's expression was grim. "The men running this operation know exactly what they're doing. They've refined their approach over years, maybe decades." Lillian felt sick. "How many women?" "I've documented 43 cases in the past 2 years alone, and those are just the ones I know about." Harrison closed his notebook. "The real number is probably in the hundreds." The room fell silent. Hundreds of women, all believing they'd found love, all having their hearts broken and their savings stolen. Hundreds of Catherine Reeves stories that hadn't ended in tragedy yet, but could at any moment. "What do you need from us?" Lillian asked. "Your full testimony published under your real names. Photographs if you're willing. Detailed descriptions of every letter, every promise, every manipulation." Harrison's eyes were intense. "I need to make this real for readers. I need them to understand that this isn't just a few women making foolish choices. This is systematic fraud targeting the most vulnerable members of our society. And if we do this, if we go public with our stories, what happens then?" Emma's voice shook slightly. "Then the people running this operation will know you're a threat." Harrison didn't sugarcoat it. "They'll know you're working to expose them, and they might take action to silence you." "What kind of action?" Sarah clutched Clara tighter. "I don't know. Maybe nothing. Most con artists prefer to move on to new territories rather than confront their victims directly. But some get violent when cornered." Harrison leaned forward. "I won't lie to you. This is dangerous. But it's also the best chance we have to stop them." Lillian looked at Emma, then at Sarah. She saw her own fear reflected in their faces, but also something else. Determination. Anger. The refusal to let Catherine Reeves's death mean nothing. "We'll do it," Lillian said. "All three of us." "Give me 2 days to write the story," Harrison said. "Then it'll run in every newspaper from here to St. Louis." After Harrison left, Cole pulled Lillian aside. They stood in the small garden behind the boarding house, the late afternoon sun painting everything gold. "You're sure about this?" he asked. "No." Lillian's honesty surprised even herself. "I'm terrified. But I'm more terrified of doing nothing while other women suffer." Cole was quiet for a moment, studying her face. "You're brave. You know that." "I'm not brave. I'm angry." Lillian felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm so angry, Cole. Angry that this happened to me, angry that it happened to Emma and Sarah and 43 other women. Angry that Catherine Reeves felt so hopeless she walked into the desert. Angry that the people who did this are still out there, still writing letters, still destroying lives." "Anger can be a kind of bravery," Cole said quietly, "when it pushes you to act instead of hiding. Or it can be a kind of foolishness." Lillian wiped her eyes roughly. "What if we make things worse? What if by speaking out we put targets on our backs and accomplish nothing?" "Then at least you tried. At least you fought." Cole reached out, then hesitated, his hand hovering near hers. "Can I ask you something?" "Yes." "Why did you answer Vernon Caldwell's advertisement in the first place? What made you willing to leave everything behind for a man you'd never met?" Lillian considered the question, really considered it, instead of deflecting. "Because I was tired of being invisible. In Boston, I was just another seamstress in a city full of seamstresses. I worked 12-hour days in a cramped apartment making beautiful clothes for women who'd never notice me if we passed on the street. Vernon's letters made me feel seen, special, like I mattered to someone." "You do matter." Cole's voice was intense. "You matter a lot, Lillian Parker. And not because some con artist wrote you pretty words, but because you're strong and smart, and you don't give up even when you've got every reason to." Lillian looked at him, really looked at him, and felt something shift in her chest. Cole Mercer had been nothing but kind since the moment he'd helped her up from the dusty street. He'd offered assistance without asking for anything in return, had protected her without making her feel weak, had believed in her fight without trying to take it over. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything." "Don't thank me yet." Cole's expression turned serious. "There's something I need to tell you. About Mr. Buchanan, and why he's been so willing to help." Lillian tensed. "What is it?" "His daughter Rebecca, she fell for a similar scheme 5 years ago. Different name, different fake rancher, but the same basic con. She lost her inheritance, $30,000 that her mother had left her." Cole's jaw tightened. The money was bad enough, but worse was what it did to her. She stopped trusting people, stopped believing in anything good. She's married now, has a good life, but Mr. Buchanan says she's never been quite the same. So he's helping us because of Rebecca. He's helping because he doesn't want other women to end up like his daughter. Cole met her eyes. "And I'm helping because I don't want you to end up like my sister Mary, so hurt and ashamed that you forget you're worth fighting for." Before Lillian could respond, Emma burst through the back door, her face flushed with excitement. "Lillian, you need to come inside, right now." "What happened?" Margaret Chen wrote back. Emma waved a telegram. "She's been tracking Vernon Caldwell for months. She's got names, locations, everything, and she wants to partner with us to take the whole operation down." Inside, they gathered around the telegram, reading Margaret's words with growing excitement. She'd documented 17 different names the con artist used, mapped out their operation across 8 states, and identified the man she believed was running the entire scheme, a former postal clerk named Theodore Marsh, who'd been fired for mail fraud 3 years ago. She says Marsh recruits local people to write the letters, pays them $20 a month, then collects the money women send for travel arrangements or settling expenses. Emma read aloud. He's been doing this for at least 5 years, maybe longer. $20 a month. Sarah's voice was bitter. That's what my life savings was worth to the woman who wrote those letters. $20. Margaret wants to meet with us in person, Emma continued. She's traveling to Quartz Hill next week. She says if we work together, pool all our information, we might have enough evidence to bring criminal charges. Criminal charges. Lillian felt hope and fear war in her chest. Against Theodore Marsh. Against everyone involved in the operation. The writers, the postal workers who forwarded the letters, anyone who took money as part of the scheme. Emma's eyes were bright. We could actually stop them, Lillian. Not just warn women away, but put the people responsible in prison. If we can prove it, Cole said carefully. That's a big if. Margaret says she's already working with postal inspectors, Emma countered. She's got testimonies from 6 other women, documentation of mail fraud across state lines. All she needs is more evidence to make the case airtight. Then we give her evidence. Lillian felt determination settle over her like armor. We give her everything we have. That night, Lillian couldn't sleep. She lay in bed listening to the sounds of the boarding house. Mrs. Crowley's footsteps downstairs. Clara's soft crying in the next room, Emma's quiet murmur as she comforted the baby while Sarah slept. These sounds had become familiar in just 2 weeks, had become the soundtrack of a life she was building from scratch. She thought about Vernon Caldwell's letters still tucked in the bottom of her carpet bag. She should burn them, should destroy every trace of the lies that had brought her here. But something made her keep them, evidence maybe, or a reminder of how easily hope could be weaponized. A soft knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. Lillian, you awake? Emma slipped inside, carrying a candle. I can't stop thinking about Catherine Reeves. Neither can I. Lillian sat up, making room for Emma on the bed. I keep wondering what her last thoughts were. If she was afraid or angry, or just too tired to keep fighting. Sheriff Harding said they found Vernon's letters in her pocket. Emma's voice cracked. She was holding them when she died. Still believing even at the end that somewhere out there was a man who loved her. That's the cruelest part. Lillian felt tears slide down her face. He made her believe she was loved, and that belief killed her. They sat together in the darkness, 2 women who'd narrowly escaped the same fate, bound together by luck and timing and the kindness of strangers. After a while, Emma spoke again. Do you think we would have become friends if we'd met in a normal way? If Vernon Caldwell had never written those letters? I don't know. Lillian considered the question honestly. You're from Kansas. I'm from Massachusetts. We come from different worlds. Under normal circumstances, we probably never would have crossed paths. Then maybe something good came out of this after all. Emma managed a weak smile. I know that sounds crazy, finding good in something so terrible, but it's not crazy. Lillian took Emma's hand. We found each other. We found Sarah. We found Mrs. Crowley and Cole and this town that took us in when we had nowhere else to go. That matters. But Catherine Reeves didn't find anyone. No, she didn't. Lillian's voice hardened. Which is why we're going to make sure no one else ends up like her. Why we're going to fight until every woman in America knows Vernon Caldwell's name and the names of every other con artist preying on hope and loneliness. A week passed in a blur of activity. Harrison's article published in the Tucson Daily Star, complete with Lillian's, Emma's, and Sarah's full testimonies and photographs. Within days, it was reprinted in newspapers across the territory. Letters started arriving at Mrs. Crowley's boarding house, women thanking them for the warning, women sharing their own stories of near misses with marriage fraud, women asking how they could help spread the word. But not all the letters were supportive. You brought this on yourselves. One letter read, written in harsh, angry script. Decent women don't answer advertisements from strange men. You got what you deserved. Another was more direct. "Stop interfering or you'll regret it." Sheriff Harding took the threatening letter seriously, started making regular patrols past the boarding house. Cole began staying later in the evenings, finding reasons to linger until after dark, and Mrs. Crowley, practical as always, bought a shotgun and kept it behind the kitchen door. "I don't scare easy," she said when Lillian asked about it. "And I don't let people threaten women under my roof." Then Margaret Chen arrived and everything accelerated. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper mind, carrying 3 bulging satchels full of documentation. "This is 5 years of work," she said, spreading papers across Mrs. Crowley's dining table. "Every case I've tracked, every name I've documented, every piece of evidence I've collected. And now, thanks to you 3, I finally have enough to take to the federal authorities." "Federal?" Sarah's eyes widened. "I thought this was just postal fraud." "It is postal fraud, but it's also fraud across state lines, which makes it a federal crime." Margaret's smile was sharp. "Which means federal prison if we can make the charges stick." She laid out the case methodically. Theodore Marsh had been running the operation from Denver, recruiting letter writers in cities across the West, collecting money from women who sent funds for travel arrangements that were never made. He'd stolen an estimated $200,000 over 5 years, destroyed countless lives, and inspired copycat operations in other states. "But here's what we didn't know until your stories came out," Margaret said, pulling out a new folder. "Marsh isn't working alone. He's got a partner, a woman named Constance Vickers, who runs the postal forwarding operation." "A woman?" Emma's voice was stunned. "A woman is helping him do this to other women. Constance handles all the return addresses, makes sure the letters can't be traced back to Denver. She's the one who keeps the operation mobile, keeps it ahead of investigators." Margaret's expression was disgusted. "She's also Theodore's wife." The revelation hit like a physical blow. A woman, another woman, was actively participating in destroying other women's lives. Not just turning a blind eye or making excuses, but actively building the mechanism that made the con work. Why? Lillian couldn't comprehend it. Why would any woman help do this? Money. Margaret's answer was blunt. "Constance gets half the profits. That's $100,000 in 5 years, enough to make her ignore any conscience she might have had." "Then we take them both down," Lillian said. "Theodore Marsh and Constance Vickers. We make sure they both pay for what they've done. That's where you come in." Margaret looked at each of them in turn. "The postal inspectors are ready to make arrests, but they need one more piece of evidence. They need to catch Theodore or Constance in the act of collecting money from a victim. They need proof that the money is going directly to them, not to some intermediary they can claim they didn't know about." "How do we provide that proof?" Emma asked. Margaret's smile was cold and satisfied. "We set a trap. We create a new victim, someone Theodore and Constance won't suspect, and we catch them taking the money." "Who?" Sarah leaned forward. "Who would they believe?" Margaret looked directly at Lillian. "You're going to write to Vernon Caldwell. You're going to tell him you've come into an inheritance $5,000 and you need his help accessing it. You're going to ask him to meet you in Denver to help arrange the transfer." Lillian's heart pounded. "And when he shows up, then we'll have him." Margaret's eyes glinted. "And we'll make sure Theodore Marsh and Constance Vickers never destroy another woman's life." Lillian's hands went cold. "You want me to go back to him? After everything?" "Not back to him into a trap." Margaret's voice was steady, logical. "You'll never be alone. The postal inspectors will be watching every step. The moment Theodore or Constance shows their face, they'll be arrested. And if something goes wrong," Cole's voice cut through the room like a blade. "If Theodore suspects it's a trap, if Constance recognizes Lillian from the newspaper articles, what then? Then we abort the operation." Margaret met his eyes without flinching. "I won't put anyone at unnecessary risk. But this is our best chance, maybe our only chance to catch them red-handed." "There's got to be another way." Emma stood up agitated. "We can't ask Lillian to walk into danger like this." "I'll do it." Lillian's voice was quiet but firm. She looked at Margaret. "Tell me exactly what I need to write." "Lillian, no." Cole started. "Yes." Lillian cut him off, her decision made. Catherine Reeves died alone in the desert because she had no one to help her. I'm not going to let that happen to anyone else, not when I can do something to stop it. "Even if it means putting yourself in danger?" Sarah asked Clara, asleep in her arms. "Especially then." Lillian's jaw set. "I've been scared and helpless for 2 weeks. I'm done being a victim. Now I'm going to be the trap that catches the predator." Margaret pulled out a fresh sheet of paper. "The letter needs to sound desperate but not suspicious. You've inherited $5,000 from a recently deceased uncle, enough money to be worth Theodore's time, but not so much that it seems fabricated. And I'm writing to Vernon because you need help managing the inheritance. Your uncle's lawyer is insisting you need a man's signature to access the funds, and you don't have any male relatives you can trust." Margaret's smile was bitter. It's the kind of legal obstacle women face every day. Theodore will believe it because it's true often enough. Lillian took the pen, her hand steady now that the decision was made. "What do I say about meeting him? Tell him you're coming to Denver to finalize the estate. Ask him to meet you at the Tremont House Hotel on the 15th of next month. That gives us 2 weeks to prepare." Margaret leaned forward. "Tell him you'll need his help with the paperwork, that you'll compensate him for his time. Make it clear you have cash money, not just promises." The words flowed onto the page, each sentence a carefully crafted lie designed to bait a trap. Lillian wrote about her fictional uncle, about the inheritance that felt like a blessing, but also a burden. She wrote about needing Vernon's steady hand to guide her through the complicated legal process. And she wrote about the $5,000 that would be waiting in Denver ready to be claimed. That's perfect. Margaret read the letter twice, checking every word. "Now sign it, and we'll send it to the address we've been monitoring. If Theodore takes the bait, we'll have a response within a week." "And if he doesn't?" Emma asked. "Then we try something else. But I think he will." Margaret's eyes were hard. $5,000 is too much money for Theodore Marsh to ignore. The letter went out the next morning. Then came the waiting 7 days that stretched like months, each one filled with second-guessing and fear. Lillian threw herself into her sewing, her needle flying through fabric as her mind raced through every possible scenario. Emma cooked elaborate meals no one had much appetite for. Sarah kept Clara close, as if the baby could protect her from the anxiety that permeated the boarding house. Cole appeared every evening, his presence both comforting and complicating. He'd started bringing small things, wildflowers from the ranch, a book he thought Lillian might enjoy, fresh bread from the bakery in town. Gifts that said he cared without demanding anything in return. "You don't have to keep checking on me," Lillian said one evening as they sat in the garden. "I'm not going to fall apart." "I know you're not." Cole turned his hat in his hands, a nervous gesture she'd never seen from him before. "That's not why I come." "Then why?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Because I want to. Because spending time with you is the best part of my day. Because—" He stopped, looking uncertain for the first time since she'd met him. "Because what?" Lillian's heart was pounding. "Because I've been falling in love with you since the day you told me to mind my own business on that dusty street." Cole's words came out rushed, like he'd been holding them back too long. "And I know the timing's terrible. I know you've got enough to deal with without me adding complications, but I couldn't let you go to Denver without knowing how I feel." Lillian couldn't breathe. "Cole, you don't have to say anything back. I just needed you to know." He stood up, settling his hat on his head. "Whatever happens in Denver, whatever comes next, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." He left before Lillian could find words, left her sitting in the garden with her heart racing and her mind reeling. She'd spent 2 weeks building walls against hope, against trust, against the belief that anyone could actually care for her without ulterior motives. And now Cole Mercer had just kicked those walls down with a handful of honest words. The response from Vernon Caldwell arrived on the 8th day. Lillian's hands shook as she opened the envelope, Margaret and Emma crowding close to read over her shoulder. "My dearest Lillian." The letter began written in that same elegant script that had once made her heart soar. "I cannot express my joy at hearing from you again. Your uncle's passing is a tragedy, but his foresight in providing for you brings comfort. I would be honored to assist you with the legal matters surrounding your inheritance. The Tremont House is an excellent choice. I will meet you in the lobby at 2 o'clock on the 15th. Please do not worry about compensating me. Helping you is reward enough." He took the bait. Margaret's voice was triumphant. "He's coming." "That's not Theodore's handwriting." Emma pointed to the signature. "Look at the slant, the pressure. This is the same person who wrote my letters. Constance Vickers." Margaret's smile turned sharp. "Even better. If we catch her meeting with Lillian, that directly ties her to the fraud. Theodore can't claim ignorance if his own wife is collecting the money." "So what happens now?" Sarah asked from the doorway. "Now we go to Denver." Margaret started gathering her papers. The postal inspectors are already setting up surveillance at the Tremont house. Lillian checks in on the 14th, lets the hotel staff know she's waiting for a business associate. We make sure Constance has every opportunity to approach her naturally. "And then?" Lillian's voice was steadier than she felt. "Then you play your part. You're a nervous young woman with an inheritance you don't know how to manage. You trust Vernon or Constance, playing Vernon's representative, to help you. You mention the $5,000, make it clear you have it in cash." Margaret met her eyes. "And the moment she makes a move to take the money, or asks you to hand it over, the inspectors move in." "What if she recognizes me from the newspapers?" Lillian asked the question that had been haunting her. "My photograph was in the article. What if Constance knows who I am?" "Then she won't show." Margaret's tone was matter-of-fact. "But I don't think she will. Con artists don't pay attention to their victims once the con is done. You're already forgotten to them, just another name in a ledger, another profit margin." The words stung, but they also steadied something in Lillian. She'd spent 2 weeks feeling like her pain mattered, like her story was important. But to Theodore and Constance, she was nothing. Just money, just another mark. "When do we leave?" Lillian asked. "Day after tomorrow. That gives us time to prepare to make sure every detail is perfect." Margaret paused. "Are you sure about this, Lillian?" "Once we're in Denver, there's no backing out." "I'm sure." The next 2 days blurred together. Mrs. Crowley insisted on altering one of her own dresses for Lillian to wear something respectable, but not too fine, the kind of dress a working woman with a sudden inheritance might choose. Emma helped Lillian practice her story until she could recite it without thinking, until the fictional uncle felt almost real. And Cole taught her what to watch for, how to read people's intentions in their body language, how to stay alert without seeming suspicious. "If anything feels wrong, you walk away," he told her the night before she left. "I don't care what Margaret says. I don't care about the case. If you feel unsafe, you leave." "I'll be careful." Lillian wanted to say more, wanted to address the confession he'd made 3 nights ago, but the words stuck in her throat. "Promise me." Cole's intensity surprised her. "Promise me you'll put your safety first." "I promise." The train to Denver left at dawn. Emma and Sarah came to see her off, both looking worried. Mrs. Crowley pressed a small derringer into Lillian's hand. "Just in case," the older woman said gruffly. "You probably won't need it, but better to have it and not need it than the other way around." Lillian tucked the small pistol into her reticule, feeling its weight settle like a promise. Then Cole appeared, walking straight up to her on the platform. "I'm coming with you," he said. "Cole, you can't." "I'm not asking permission. Mr. Buchanan gave me the week off. I'm coming to Denver. I'm staying at a hotel across the street from the Tremont house, and I'm not letting you walk into danger alone." His jaw was set immovable, Margaret can have her operation, the inspectors can have their case, but I'm going to be there in case something goes wrong. Lillian wanted to argue, wanted to tell him she could handle this herself. But the truth was, having Cole there made her feel braver, made the fear seem more manageable. "All right," she said quietly. "But you stay out of sight. Don't do anything that might spook Constance. I'll be invisible." Cole's smile was tight. "Right up until you need me." Denver was bigger than Lillian expected, busier and louder and more overwhelming. The Tremont House stood in the center of the city, a grand building that made her feel small and out of place. Margaret had arranged everything: a room on the second floor, documentation of the fictional inheritance, even a bank statement showing $5,000 in Lillian's name. "It's all borrowed from the Postal Service," Margaret explained as they reviewed the papers. "But Constance won't know that. As far as she's concerned, you're a naive young woman with more money than sense." "How do you know she'll come to the hotel?" Lillian asked. "What if she just writes back asking me to wire the money?" "Because $5,000 is too much to risk to wire fraud. If the transfer gets intercepted or flagged, they lose everything." Margaret's confidence was absolute. "No, Constance will come in person. She'll want to see the money, touch it, confirm it's real before she makes her move." That night, Lillian barely slept. She lay in the unfamiliar hotel bed, listening to the sounds of Denver outside her window, thinking about what would happen tomorrow. Somewhere in this city, Constance Vickers was preparing to meet her. Somewhere, Theodore Marsh was counting on another successful con. And somewhere, Catherine Reeves's family was mourning a daughter they'd never see again. The next morning arrived too fast. Lillian dressed carefully in Mrs. Crowley's altered dress, arranged her hair in a simple style, practiced her nervous expression in the mirror. She had to look like a woman in over her head, someone who needed help managing sudden wealth. She had to look like easy prey. At 1:45, she went down to the lobby. Margaret was already there, pretending to read a newspaper. Two men Lillian recognized as postal inspectors sat near the window, looking like businessmen waiting for appointments. And through the front window, she could see Cole across the street, leaning against a post in a way that looked casual, but kept his eyes on the hotel entrance. 2:00 came and went. Lillian waited, her hands folded in her lap, her heart hammering against her ribs. Every woman who walked through the door made her tense, made her wonder if this was Constance Vickers finally showing her face. At 2:15, a well-dressed woman in her 40s entered the lobby. She wore an expensive traveling suit and carried herself with confidence, but her eyes were cold and calculating as they swept the room. Those eyes landed on Lillian, and something flickered their recognition assessment decision. The woman walked straight to Lillian. "Miss Parker, I'm Mrs. Vernon Caldwell. My husband sends his regrets. He was called away on urgent business. He asked me to assist you in his absence." Lillian's blood turned to ice. Mrs. Vernon Caldwell. Constance was pretending to be Vernon's wife, using the fake name as a shield. The audacity of it, the sheer arrogance, made Lillian want to scream. Instead, she smiled nervously. "Oh, I wasn't expecting, Mr. Caldwell didn't mention he was married." "It's a recent development." Constance's smile was practiced, warm, completely false. "But Vernon has told me so much about you. About your uncle's unfortunate passing and the inheritance he left you. Such a blessing, but also quite overwhelming, I imagine." "Very overwhelming." Lillian let her voice shake slightly. "I've never had to manage this much money before. The lawyer said I needed a man's signature to access the funds, and I didn't know who else to turn to. Vernon was happy to help, and so am I." Constance sat down beside her, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "Between you and me, dear lawyers can be such vultures. They see a young woman alone with money, and they circle looking for ways to take their cut. Best to handle these matters privately with people you can trust." "That's what I thought." Lillian glanced toward the bank documentation she'd placed on the table between them. "I have the funds already transferred to a Denver bank. The lawyer arranged it before I left Boston." Constance's eyes sharpened, fixing on the papers like a hawk spotting prey. Very wise. May I see the documentation, just to make sure everything is in order? This was it. The moment. Lillian handed over the papers, watching Constance's expression as she reviewed the bank statement showing $5,000 in Lillian Parker's name. This all looks correct. Constance's voice was smooth, but Lillian could hear the greed underneath. However, I notice the account is in your name only. Without a male co-signer, you won't be able to make withdrawals over a certain amount. That's where Vernon or I in his absence can assist you. How would that work? Lillian asked, playing naive. Simple. We go to the bank together, you introduce me as your business manager or financial advisor, and I help you withdraw the funds. Then I can hold the money in trust until you're ready to use it, saving you the headache of managing it yourself. Constance leaned in closer. For a small administrative fee, of course. Say 5%. $250. Constance was asking for $250 for the privilege of stealing Lillian's entire inheritance. The brazenness of it took Lillian's breath away. That seems very reasonable, Lillian said carefully. When could we go to the bank? Now, if you're ready. The bank closes at 4, so we should move quickly. Constance stood up, gathering the papers. Do you have your identification documents? The bank will need to verify your identity. I have everything upstairs in my room. Lillian rose, her legs shaky. Should I go get them? Actually. Constance's hand shot out, gripping Lillian's wrist. Why don't I come with you? These hotels can be dangerous for young women alone. Better to have someone watching your back. The touch sent revulsion through Lillian's body. This woman had written the letters that destroyed her life, had taken her money, had pushed Catherine Reeves toward death in the desert. And now she wanted to come to Lillian's room, wanted to isolate her, wanted to take even more. I don't think, Lillian started. I insist. Constance's grip tightened, and for the first time, Lillian saw the steel underneath the polished exterior. After all, Vernon trusted me to keep you safe. I wouldn't be doing my job if I let you wander around alone with all this talk of money. Lillian's heart raced. This wasn't part of the plan. Margaret had said Constance would ask to meet at the bank, would make the move in public where the inspectors could observe. Going upstairs alone changed everything, made the situation more dangerous, more unpredictable. She looked toward Margaret, trying to signal distress. But Margaret gave a tiny nod. Proceed, the nod said. The inspectors will follow. Trust the plan. Lillian had no choice. All right, my room is on the second floor. They walked toward the stairs together, Constance's hand still on Lillian's elbow, in a grip that looked friendly but felt like a vice. Behind them, Lillian heard footsteps, the inspectors following at a discreet distance, Margaret trailing behind. And outside through the window, she caught a glimpse of Cole's face, tight with concern. In the stairwell, away from the lobby's watching eyes. Constance's demeanor shifted. The warm smile disappeared, replaced by something colder and harder. You're not from Boston, Constance said flatly. It wasn't a question. Lillian's blood froze. What? Your accent. It's Boston, yes, but there's something else underneath. Something more recent. Arizona, maybe? Constance's eyes narrowed. And that dress you're wearing, it's been altered. I can see the needle marks where the seams were taken in. A woman with a $5,000 inheritance wouldn't be wearing someone else's altered hand-me-downs. They'd reached the second-floor landing. Lillian's room was 3 doors down, but suddenly felt much farther away. Behind them, she heard the inspector's footsteps on the stairs, but they were too far back, too distant to help if something went wrong right now. I don't know what you mean. Lillian tried, but her voice betrayed her fear. Yes, you do. Constance's hand moved to her reticule, and Lillian saw the outline of something metal inside. A gun. You're one of them, aren't you? One of Vernon's disappointed brides come to Denver looking for revenge. How did you find us? Who told you about Theodore? Nobody told me anything. Lillian backed toward her room, her hand fumbling for Mrs. Crowley's derringer in her own reticule. I just needed help with my inheritance. Liar. Constance pulled out a small pistol, keeping it low and hidden from any casual observer. You're working with that Chen woman, aren't you? The one who's been writing those damned articles stirring up trouble. How much is she paying you to play bait? The inspectors appeared at the top of the stairs. Mrs. Vickers put the weapon down. But Constance was already moving. She grabbed Lillian, pulling her close with the gun pressed against her side. Stay back or she dies. I swear to God I'll shoot her right here. Constance, don't make this worse. Margaret's voice came from the stairwell. Worse? You've already ruined everything. Constance's voice cracked, the polished veneer finally shattering. 5 years of careful work, 5 years of building this operation, and you people destroy it with your articles and your righteous fury. Do you know what Theodore will do when he finds out I let you catch me? Then let her go and we can talk about a deal, one of the inspectors said calmly. You give us Theodore, we'll see about reducing your charges. There's no deal. Constance's grip tightened on Lillian, the gun digging painfully into her ribs. Theodore will kill me if I betray him. I'd rather take my chances with a jury. Then take your chances without a hostage, Lillian said, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. Shooting me just adds murder to your fraud charges. Let me go and maybe you'll see daylight before you're 90. Shut up! Constance started backing toward the stairs, dragging Lillian with her. Everyone move back. Clear the stairs. I'm walking out of here with her, and if anyone tries to stop me, I'll paint these walls with her blood. The inspectors exchanged glances. Margaret looked stricken. And then, through the window at the end of the hall, Lillian saw Cole climbing the fire escape. She had seconds to make a choice. Let Constance drag her down to the street and risk whatever came next. Or trust that Cole would reach them in time, that Mrs. Crowley's Derringer would fire, if she needed it, that 3 weeks of building herself back up hadn't been for nothing. Lillian made her choice. She went completely limp in Constance's grip, dropping her full weight toward the floor like a sack of grain. The sudden shift caught Constance off balance, her hand slipping from Lillian's arm as she tried to keep both her hostage and her gun steady. In that half-second of confusion, Lillian twisted hard to the side, breaking free. The gun went off. The sound exploded through the narrow hallway, deafening and terrible. Lillian felt the bullet tear past her shoulder so close she could feel its heat. Then she was on the floor, rolling away, and Cole was crashing through the window at the end of the hall in a shower of glass. Get down! One of the postal inspectors rushed forward, his own weapon drawn. Constance swung toward him, raising her pistol, but Margaret threw herself at Constance's legs from behind. Both women went down hard. Constance's gun skittering across the wooden floor. Cole reached Lillian first, pulling her up and back, checking her for wounds with frantic hands. Are you hit? Lillian, are you hit? No, I'm fine. But she wasn't fine. She was shaking so hard, her teeth chattered the reality of how close she'd come to death, finally breaking through her adrenaline. I'm fine. The inspectors had Constance in handcuffs, now her expensive traveling suit torn and dusty, her carefully styled hair falling around her face. Without the polished exterior, she looked older, meaner, defeated. Theodore will come for me. Constance spat at the inspectors. He'll get me out. You think you can hold me? You have no idea who you're dealing with. Actually, we do. Margaret stood up, brushing herself off. Because while you were busy threatening Miss Parker, Theodore Marsh was being arrested at his office in Denver. We've had people watching him for weeks. The moment you walked into this hotel, we moved on him too. Constance's face went white. No, that's not possible. Not only possible, but done. Margaret's smile was cold and satisfied. You and your husband are finished, Mrs. Vickers. Your operation is over, and every woman you two ever conned is going to know that justice was served. It wasn't my fault. Constance's voice rose desperate now. Theodore made me do it. He said we needed the money. He said it was harmless, just lonely women who'd never be happy anyway. I didn't want to hurt anyone. But you did hurt them. Lillian found her strength. You helped destroy hundreds of lives. You pushed Catherine Reeves into the desert to die. You took everything from women who had nothing, and you did it for money. Don't you dare claim you didn't want to hurt anyone." "She was weak." Constance screamed at all pretense gone now. "Catherine Reeves was weak and foolish, and if she couldn't handle a little disappointment, that's not my fault. None of you should have been stupid enough to fall for our letters in the first place." The inspectors dragged her away, still screaming, still blaming everyone but herself. Her voice echoed down the stairwell until a door slammed and cut it off. Lillian stood in the hallway, Cole's arm still around her, feeling like the floor had dropped out from under her feet. They'd done it. They'd actually caught Constance Vickers and Theodore Marsh. The con artists who'd destroyed so many lives were going to prison. "You're bleeding." Cole's voice was tight. He touched her shoulder gently, and Lillian saw blood on her dress where the bullet had grazed her. "It's just a scratch." But now that he'd pointed it out, it burned like fire. "Let me see." Cole helped her to her room, sat her on the bed, carefully examined the wound. "The bullet barely touched you. Another inch to the left." His voice broke. "Another inch and I would have lost you before I even had you. But you didn't lose me." Lillian took his hand, squeezing tight. "I'm here. I'm safe. We won, Cole." "You could have died." Cole's eyes were fierce, scared, angry. "That wasn't part of any plan. That wasn't God. Lillian, when I saw that gun pointed at you, I thought my heart would stop." "I'm sorry." Lillian didn't know what else to say. "I'm sorry I scared you. Don't apologize for being brave." Cole pulled her close, careful of her injured shoulder. "Just promise me you'll never do anything that dangerous again." "I can't promise that." Lillian's honesty surprised even herself. "Not if there are more women who need help, more con artists who need stopping. I can't promise I'll always play it safe." Cole pulled back to look at her. "Then promise me you won't face the danger alone. Promise me you'll let me stand beside you." "Cole, I meant what I said in Quartz Hill." His voice was raw, honest. "I'm in love with you, Lillian Parker. I love your strength and your stubbornness, and the way you fight for what's right even when it scares you. And I want to spend the rest of my life standing beside you while you make the world a better place." Lillian felt tears slide down her face. "I don't know how to do this. Trust again. Believe someone when they say they care about me." "Then don't trust me yet." Cole wiped her tears with gentle thumbs. "Let me earn it. Let me prove day after day that my words match my actions, that I'm not going anywhere, that I love you. Not because of pretty letters, but because of who you are when the world is hardest." "That could take a long time." "I've got time." Cole's smile was soft, patient. "I've got all the time you need." Margaret appeared in the doorway, her expression carefully neutral. "The inspectors want your statement, Lillian. Are you up for it?" "Give me 10 minutes." Lillian stood up, straightening her torn and bloodied dress. "I want to wash my face and change. Then I'll tell them everything." The statement took 2 hours. Lillian recounted every moment from the lobby meeting to the hallway confrontation, her words captured by a stenographer who wrote with mechanical precision. When she finished, the lead inspector shook her hand. "You did good work today, Miss Parker. Brave work. Theodore Marsh and Constance Vickers won't see freedom for a very long time." "What about the other people who worked for them?" Lillian asked. "The letter writers, the postal workers who helped. We're tracking them down now. With Marsh and Vickers in custody, we expect most of them to cooperate in exchange for lighter sentences." The inspector's expression softened. "This is the biggest mail fraud bust in 5 years. You and Miss Chen and the other women, you made this happen." After he left, Margaret sat down across from Lillian. "You should know that the story is already hitting newspapers across the country. The arrest of Theodore Marsh and Constance Vickers. The exposure of their operation, your role in bringing them down. By tomorrow morning, every woman in America will know what happened here." "Will they know about Catherine Reeves?" Lillian asked quietly. "They will. I made sure the reporters understood that she was a victim too, that her death was a direct result of Marsh and Vickers' fraud." Margaret's eyes were fierce. Catherine's name will be remembered. Her story will matter. Good. Lillian felt something settle in her chest. That's good. The train back to Quartz Hill left the next morning. Lillian sat by the window watching Denver disappear behind her, thinking about everything that had changed in 3 weeks. She'd come to this territory expecting one life and found something completely different. She'd been broken and rebuilt. She'd lost everything and discovered what actually mattered. Cole sat beside her close but not crowding, his presence steady and warm. He'd already sent a telegram to Red Crest Ranch asking for a longer leave. "I want to make sure you're settled before I go back to work," he'd said. "Want to make sure you've got everything you need." "What about what you need?" Lillian had asked. "I need to know you're safe and happy, that's all." The Quartz Hill station was crowded when they arrived. Emma stood on the platform with Sarah and Clara, both women, rushing forward the moment Lillian stepped down from the train. Mrs. Crowley waited nearby, her expression carefully neutral, but her eyes bright with relief. "You did it." Emma threw her arms around Lillian. "The newspapers are full of it. Theodore Marsh arrested Constance Vickers in jail, the whole operation shut down. You actually did it." "We did it." Lillian pulled back to include Emma and Sarah in her gaze. "All of us together. None of this would have happened if we hadn't stood up and fought back." "There are letters waiting for you at the boarding house," Sarah said. "Dozens of them. Women writing to thank you, women asking for advice, women saying your story saved them from making the same mistake." That night, Lillian sat at Mrs. Crowley's kitchen table, reading through the letters. Some were heartbreaking women who'd already fallen for similar cons and didn't know how to rebuild. Some were hopeful women who'd seen the newspaper articles just in time, who'd torn up letters from suspicious suitors and saved themselves. And some were angry women who'd been conned years ago and thought they were the only ones, thought they were too foolish to deserve sympathy. "You should write back to them," Margaret said. She'd come to Quartz Hill too, planning to stay a week before returning to Kansas City. "Start a network. Help women connect with each other, share information, warn each other about new cons." "I'm a seamstress, not an organizer," Lillian protested. "You're whatever you choose to be." Margaret's voice was firm. "And right now, women across this country need someone to believe in, someone who'll fight for them." "You could be that person, Lillian." "We could all be that person," Emma interjected. "Between the three of us, we could answer these letters, publish warnings, help other women before they lose everything, like we almost did." "I still have to earn my keep here," Lillian said practically. "I can't just stop sewing to become some kind of advocate for conned women." "Why not do both?" Mrs. Crowley spoke up from her chair. "You sew during the day, you write letters at night. Emma cooks, Sarah manages the boarding house, and together you build something that matters. I don't see why you can't have both." Over the next weeks, that's exactly what they did. Lillian sewed during daylight hours, her reputation growing as word spread about the seamstress, whose skill matched any Boston shop. Women came from neighboring towns to have dresses made, to have their daughters' wedding gowns stitched with care and precision. The work paid well, better than Lillian had ever earned in Boston. But at night she wrote letters. Dozens of them, then hundreds, responding to every woman who'd reached out. Emma helped organize the correspondence. Sarah kept track of patterns, which towns had the most complaints, which names kept appearing in warnings, which schemes seemed to be replacing the Vernon Caldwell con. And slowly, methodically, they built a network of women watching out for each other. Cole kept his word. He appeared every evening after work, helping with whatever needed doing, repairing the boarding house's front steps, carrying supplies from the mercantile, playing with Clara, while Sarah wrote her letters. He never pushed, never demanded more than Lillian was ready to give. He just showed up day after day, proving through action what his words had promised. "You're wearing me down," Lillian told him one evening as they sat in the garden. It was early July now, nearly 2 months since she'd first arrived in Quartz Hill. "Good." Cole's smile was warm. "That's the plan." "I'm starting to believe you might actually love me." Lillian's voice was soft, almost wondering. Might? Cole's eyebrows rose. Lillian Parker, I am wildly, completely, absolutely in love with you. There's no might about it. Then I should probably tell you that I love you too. The words came easier than Lillian expected. I've been fighting it because I was scared, but I'm tired of being scared. I'm tired of letting Vernon Caldwell's lies define how I see the world. Vernon Caldwell doesn't exist, Cole reminded her gently. But I do. And I'm not going anywhere. I know. Lillian took his hand. I finally know. The wedding happened in August, a simple ceremony at the small church in Quartz Hill. Emma and Sarah stood up with Lillian, both women crying through the entire service. Mrs. Crowley sat in the front row pretending her eyes were watering from dust. And half the town showed up because Lillian's story had spread, and people wanted to witness the happy ending. Mr. Buchanan gave Lillian away, his expression proud. My Rebecca would have liked you, he whispered as they walked down the aisle. You've got the same fire she lost. Don't ever let anyone take that from you. The ceremony was short, the words simple. Cole promised to love Lillian through hard times and good times, to support her work, even when it scared him to stand beside her while she fought for what was right. Lillian promised to trust him, to let him share her burdens, to build a life together that honored both their dreams. When the minister pronounced them married, Cole kissed her like she was precious and strong and everything he'd ever wanted, and Lillian kissed him back, tasting joy and hope and the sweet relief of knowing she'd found something real. The reception was held at Mrs. Crowley's boarding house tables, set up in the garden food, contributed by everyone in town. Margaret had traveled from Kansas City for the occasion, bringing news that made Lillian's heart soar. Theodore Marsh was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison, Margaret announced during the toasts. Constance Vickers got 15, and 17 of their accomplices have been arrested across 8 states. The Vernon Caldwell operation is finished. The crowd erupted in cheers. Emma grabbed Lillian's hand, squeezing tight. Sarah lifted Clara up, letting the baby see the celebration. And Lillian felt tears stream down her face. Tears of relief, of victory, of overwhelming gratitude that she'd survived to see this day. There's more, Margaret continued. The Postal Service is implementing new protections based on our investigation. Warning posters at train stations. Inspector training on how to identify mail fraud. A registry of known con artists that station masters can access. What we started here in Quartz Hill is changing how the entire country handles these crimes. Later, when the guests had left and the evening had quieted down, Lillian and Cole walked through town toward the small house he'd rented their house, now the place where they'd start their married life. The same dusty street where Lillian had stumbled 3 months ago now felt like home. Are you happy? Cole asked as they walked. Lillian considered the question honestly. 3 months ago, she'd been devastated, broken, believing her life was over. She'd stood on a train platform with 17 cents and no future, feeling like the world had crushed her into nothing. But that woman was gone now, replaced by someone stronger. Someone who'd fought back against injustice, who'd helped dismantle a criminal operation, who'd turned her pain into purpose. Someone who'd learned that missing a train could be the best thing that ever happened to her. I'm happy, Lillian said, and meant it completely. I'm happier than I ever thought possible. Good. Cole pulled her close. Because I plan to spend every day of the rest of my life making sure you stay that way. Inside their new home, Lillian saw that Emma and Sarah had already been there. Flowers filled every room, gifts covered the table, and a note in Emma's handwriting sat on the mantel. Welcome home. Thank you for teaching us that missing the wrong train can lead you to the right life. Love always, your sisters in survival. Lillian read it twice, her throat tight with emotion. She thought about Catherine Reeves, about the 43 other women whose stories had ended differently. She thought about all the future women who'd be protected by the network they'd built, the warnings they'd spread, the justice they'd fought for. Then she turned to Cole, took his hand, and led him toward their future, a future built not on lies and empty promises, but on trust, earned day by day, on love, proven through action, on the unshakable foundation of two people who'd chosen each other with eyes wide open. She'd come to Quartz Hill expecting to meet a man who didn't exist. Instead, she'd found herself stronger, braver, more capable than she'd ever imagined. She'd found true friends who'd stood beside her through the hardest fight of her life. And she'd found a man whose love was as solid and dependable as the Arizona ground beneath her feet. Missing her train had felt like the end of everything, but it had actually been the beginning of the life she was always meant to live, a life of purpose, passion, and the kind of love that couldn't be written in letters because it had to be lived day by precious day in the arms of the cowboy